It's been 1 week since the December 16th banned and restricted announcement. We had this great change come to us for the modern format in the One Ring, Amp Raptor, and Gigantha disappearing out of the format, with Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, Looting, and the ever-loved Splinter Twin back to replace it. Net positive cards have entered the format. Net positive, folks. We are one more busted card entering the format than before last Monday, and I wanted to do a quick look. I'll probably be doing this in a month as well. I wanted to take a 1 week look at what has happened in the modern metagame. It's very hard to tell for certain where things lie, especially because there's only been like 4 modern challenges and a couple of 5-0 dumps, but we can make good assumptions as to how we think we should be sideboarding, adapting, and honestly, maybe looking at some of the decks that are unfortunately still around. So take this with a grain of salt. This is a good way to gauge your Christmas time, holiday, modern playings here. So let's take a look at the metagame. Now, firstly, 30-day metagame goated. Mill is a top 5 deck apparently in the last 30 days. 3% of the metagame. Thank you, Mill folks out there. If I got any Mill players watching this comment section down below, you know where to leave that like. Now, for everyone else, let's just actually go to 7 days. This is where we want to be, right? Oh my god, the modern energy deck, the Mardu energy deck is still around. I have no interest in covering that, okay? Energy is probably still going to be at the top. Let's be honest, Guide of Souls is probably going to be banned. I was the one asking for Guide of Souls to be banned. I honestly thought, forget Amp Raptor, it should have been Guide. Guide is such a crazy card. It provides a team buff. It's just, it's so good. It should have been Guide of Souls. A lot of people are talking about Ocelot Pride. I feel like Ocelot has a lot of good value outside of energy. It's not energy specific. It's just powerful in the sense that it was designed in Modern Horizons 3. Guide of Souls is probably the card that should go. Now, there's something to be said about Orcish Bowmasters, but I'm like up and down on that train. I'm not too far onto it. I honestly still am on the world where, you know, something like Ren and 6 should be banned, but maybe if we keep power tripping our cards, we get there as well. Let's look at the other decks to take a good look at where Mox Opal has landed, Faithless Looting has landed, Green Sun Zenith, and maybe if Splinter Twin has landed at all. So let's take a look at creativity. Now, creativity very easily was, you know, Jund, sometimes Grixis in weird ways, but really Jund has opted for Faithless Looting, a Ren and 6 strategy that, you know, uses Ren and 6 as its mid-range long game plan. It's not a deck necessarily looking to abuse Ren and 6, but it's there as like a kind of red herring, right? Like, oh, I played Ren and 6 on turn 2. That's not the problem. The problem is they turn 1 Faithless Looting to then Ren and 6 to then potentially get back a land, but also put an Archon of Cruelty into the yard, which they can then maybe persist if you get rid of the Ren and 6 or they know you have an answer to the Ren and 6. So a deck that's pretty simple. It's another deck that abuses Fable of the Mirror Breaker, a card that as the days go on, I fundamentally can't get around how absolutely insane Fable of the Mirror Breaker is. As someone who's a learning legacy right now playing Painter, this card is so messed up. It's so messed up. Kiki Jiki, card draw early, creating a 2/2 body for 3. This card is so messed up. Right? I'm not saying it should be banned in modern, but like, yo, as a red mid-range deck, if you're not playing Fable of the Mirror Breaker, what are you doing? What are you really doing? I don't think you're a good mid-range deck without Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Rest of the combo, honestly, it just gets like supplemented by Faithless Looting like really well. I'm surprised there isn't like, I don't know, like I'm surprised there isn't some level of, you know, Troll of Khazad-dûm in here. I guess because they have enough searching anyway. The deck list pretty tight now that Faithless Looting is in here as well. The random, like, you know, Thoughtseize supplement of Inquisition of Khazad, like there's not much to say about the main board of this. Yes, it's doing busted things. It's got creativity. It still has like the Dwarven Mines and stuff to create tokens. Ren and 6 unfortunately does not do that for them. I say that unfortunately as, you know, maybe someone that's playing creativity. Fable does do that, which is also part of the busted nonsense of that. Bit of Reunion is there for a little bit of card drop, but also to give your Archon haste. And then out of the sideboard, we see some adaptations already coming through. Now, the Veil of Summer is there not only for the black strategies. This helps against Orcish Bowmasters, the prevalence of Faithless Looting, very relevant in a metagame where you need clean, efficient removal against Mox Opal strategies, but also against the amount of counter magic that does exist. We're going to see in a little bit that Consign to Memory is still a very powerful magic card in today's day and age, and Meltdown is the natural inclusion that we see out of Modern Horizons 3. Not knowing that they're going to unban Opal, we got one of the best kind of artifact hate spells in Magic in constructed formats. We see this in Legacy every so often. Just Meltdown, red, X, destroy each artifact with mana value X or less. So you could pay 1 and then the Opals are dead because X is 0. Opals, baubles, stuff like that. If you pay 1, if you pay this for 2, you're probably wiping out most things, right? Urza Saga targets all are going to get lost with the Meltdown as well. So Meltdown is just a really solid sideboard card right now. Break the Ice, we see this as something that, you know, hits the colorless strategies, Tron, not even Tron, sorry, I should say Eldrazi, Tron, or just Eldrazi in general. It's still really powerful, which I want to touch on later on. And then Pop Patch Formation. This one's really great for a little bit of variety. This one's instant speed, destroy target creature with flying. You can hit something like Crackling Drakes or something like Arclight Phoenixes, destroy target enchantment. You can hit opposing Blood Moons, you can hit Fables, whole lot of stuff. You can hit Sagas, like there's plenty of things that you can hit with that, and then draw a card, create a food token. You know, you can, it can't hurt to, you know, get a little bit deeper into your deck when you need it as a top deck, and also gain a little bit of life against the aggressive strategies. So Indomitable Creativity, not that surprising as to where it lands. I'm surprised it's actually like a top deck, like this far up at like number 2, but it does a lot of busted things. It has like the quote unquote combo finish. It has Ren as the long game, and Fable the Mirror Breaker, again, just as a busted magic card with some additional reach. This is a 3 lightning bolt strategy. It has a little bit of reach off the ground as well if you're losing a lot of life, so be careful about that. Next up, we have Temur Breach. This is probably going to be the premier Mox Opal strategy, also using Mox Amber in combination with something like Emery or Tamiyo. I mean, yo, I'm surprised, like, yo, the lack of Mox Amber once Tamiyo was released was kind of crazy. It was being used in the blue mid-range strategies. You're looking at it alongside something like Frog, but when it comes to this, really makes sense, right? Like, you on turn 1, you could go Bauble, Mox, Tamiyo, Emery, like you start playing stuff out, right? Like you can go, actually you could go Bauble, Mox, Opal plays Emery, Mox Amber turns on, you could play Tamiyo. Like, you're already doing crazy stuff off the turn 1. This is a breach strategy. You're just going to play out your whole deck, play Grape Shot. Malevolent Rumble is a crazy good magic card. Not busted in any way. This card is great in Pauper as well. It's a card that functionally lets you search the top 4 cards of your deck for 1 mana because you get a colorless Eldrazi back. Really powerful in Pauper Splinter Twin as well. So there's a lot going on in this strategy. It's just a combo strategy. It's able to use the Mox. You know, we've been trying to replicate the sheer power of the original Moxes for a very long time. Of course, it's going to be here. We have a lot of one-ofs in here as targets for our Urza Sagas, so that makes sense. We have the Haywires, Aether Spell Bombs, Tormod's Script for some graveyard hate, Nature's Claim for opposing artifact strategies, blah, blah, blah. We have Spell Piercer just as some catch-alls, very efficient in a world where you expect something like Fatal Pushes and Spell Pierces to come at you, and then also against maybe bigger enchantments like Splinter Twin, Veil of Summer for a little bit of protection, and Narset against the decks that look to outdraw you, also a little bit of peeking through to get the cards that you need, because Narset can -2 look for a non-creature, non-land card that searches for many of your cards, including the Underworld Breach. So a lot of very valuable stuff in this deck. Pretty simple combo strategy, again, made a lot faster with the turn 1 capabilities that Mox Opal gives you, and a deck that is relatively, you know, unaffected, I should say, by something like Orcish Bowmasters. Once you have your yard full, there's a fair amount of card draw here and there, but Malevolent Rumble helps with like the kind of tutoring aspect. You do fill your graveyard a lot with kind of pitching out different legendary artifacts and playing multiple Ambers and Opals. You mill out a fair amount with the Emerys. Like, there isn't a lot of card draw here. It's a combo deck, again, that can get around Orcish Bowmasters, which is very valuable if Mardu energies at the top, if black-based strategies are using Orcish Bowmasters and trying to out-mid range you in that and outvalue you. Speaking of Orcish Bowmasters, I'm actually really surprised that this isn't Mardu. This is not Mardu midrange, folks. This is Hollow One, the great return of Hollow One. Let me know in the comment section down below if y'all want to see some Hollow One gameplay, because I was an ex Hollow One savant. I was one that worked with the randomness. I was a gambling man at some point here. Oh baby, let me tell you, a good old burning inquiry. You know what? It's crazy to me that the deck list is so tight here that it doesn't play Goblin lore, which I'm kind of surprised with. See, this is called Mardu midrange, and they got all this stuff in here. Yeah, see, it's not being categorized properly. It's called Mardu midrange, but this is not Mardu midrange. This is showing itself as the energy decks, but like really, it is the Mardu energy decks. But I'm happy to see Hollow One kind of out here as well. I mean, if we kind of click through here, is it all just Mardu energy? Oh my lord. I think it's just being miscategorized. Yeah, it's literally just Mardu energy being miscategorized. So if we go back here, this is Mardu energy. So Mardu midrange is Mardu actually. Oh my god, here I am trying to make a point about Hollow One that I didn't even research properly. Oh my god, I'm gonna keep this in. Because Lord knows this just adds to the problem of Mardu being a goddamn problem. Regardless, I'm happy to see that with how this deck has like ultimately like come out. I'm happy to see that Faithless Looting still has like something to do in Hollow One. It's still doing something. It's still doing some busted stuff. Like we have it in creativity. We see Hollow One close to the top. We have a lot of Faithless Looting strategies. People are still going to be trying to force Dredge as well, but there's going to be a level of Graveyard Hate to stop that. We have an Opal deck at the top as well. Unfortunately, we still have energy running around in this format, thanks to probably something like Guide of Souls. It's not Flage. Folks, it is not Flage. It is not Flage. Flage is only held up by Arena of Glory. That is it. The only reason Flage is any good is the threat of Arena of Glory. Lightning Helix is a powerful effect, but I had people trying to argue with me that Flage is better than Uro. You're mentally ill if you think that. You have not played enough Modern. You're too new. You're too new if you're telling me this card is better than Uro. You're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Uro's in this format. I'm playing Path to Exile. I'm playing Better Removal. Your Flage does not matter. Uro is the single best Titan out of the three that have been printed so far. Arena of Glory is the only thing holding up Flage as an argument here, and it's surprisingly good in this format. Arena of Glory does a lot. This is a good Magic card, honestly. Flage should not be banned. Orcish Bowmaster seems okay for now. And I think, like, honestly, out of this whole package, Ajani is pretty fine as well. Ragavan, we're past the point of trying to ban that. Guide of Souls, like Ocelot Pride, as I mentioned, it doesn't do anything specifically related to energy. It synergizes a lot. I think this card still has some room to breathe in like creature-based go-wide strategies. The problem with this type of creature-based go-wide strategy is the energy package is a little too powerful when it comes to stuff like in combination with something like Static Prison, which this deck isn't even playing. Absolutely wild to me. Anyway. Mono green combo, the deck that I really wanted to touch on specifically, because talking about the fact that we still have Glaring Fleshraker in this format being a problem. Kozilek's Command and Glaring Fleshraker are a problem like that, just infinite proportions. Obviously, still around in Legacy, very much a problem there. People talking about Eldrazi being definitely the most powerful deck in the format. If not that, it's Oops All Spells. We haven't had enough time to really make that type of kind of conversation go about yet. I'm not saying this is busted or the top tier 0 deck of Modern, but Eldrazi is really powerful and it still has staying power here. And I'm so happy to see that the Pauper Splinter Twin combo deck still has some level of viability in something like in Modern. You don't have Sadistically, as I mentioned in my previous videos, your combination is something like Blade of Bloodchief. For those of you that don't understand the combo here, whenever a 1/1 counter is put onto Basking Broodscale, you create a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn, and when you have Blade of Bloodchief equipped onto the Broodscale, whenever a creature dies, so you sacrifice the spawn, you put a 1/1 counter on the Basking Broodscale, so you make your Broodscale infinitely large, and you just create a bunch of death triggers. This combos in something like Glaring Fleshraker. Whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, so you create those spawn tokens over and over again, then you deal 1 damage to each opponent, notably getting around various protection or hexproof or whatever. Like this was a great way to get around the One Ring. So just a good way to kind of beat the regular conditions that you may or may not have there. You can create really large walking ballistas, just a lot of powerful things, still abusing Malevolent Rumble, a lot of powerful things coming out of this strategy, and some built-in graveyard hate with something like Agatha's Soul Cauldron that can be really powerful. You have this Tarian Soul Cleaver. Whenever another artifact or a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, if you were to have this out, you know, you can just infinitely make another creature large as well, with the token kind of entering there, and just a whole lot of stuff. Cavern of Souls, you have your green parts as well. Eldrazi stuff to ramp out Urza Saga as your catch-all for your one-ofs. You have a bunch of one-ofs in your sideboard to tutor out for the Urza Saga. I'm wondering why this deck is playing like one defense grid, one Soulless Jailer. I guess because you're playing Ancient Stirring to tutor for it. I just don't know if that's like good enough. It's really weird. I don't know. I don't know if that's where you want to be, like one-ofs with these. Defense grid is kind of funny with the amount of counter magic, I guess. Like, you know, stuff that your opponent wants to do on their turn. And I mean, to be fair, this also helps against something like Force of Negation, so there is that. But outside of that, Thief of Existence is also a great magic card when it comes to taking things. So Eldrazi combo is still going to be really powerful. A deck that has largely been not touched, right? Like this was a One Ring deck, but it's very happy to adapt. Still a very powerful combo, and still has a lot of staying power outside of the unbans. Heck, even the bans being able to adapt through the One Ring leaving. The next deck I want to talk about is Grixis Murktide, the frog strategy. I'm still on the train of Psychic Frog is still a powerful threat. A lot of people can make the argument that it's not that powerful in Modern. Legacy is obviously a different kind of metric for that. The big thing that this deck wants to do, right? It's called Grixis Murktide, but it's playing like 3 Meltdown in the sideboard. It's not playing Faithless Looting, right? So we can kind of click through the various versions of this. So we can see that even if we click here, it's just Meltdown out of the sideboard. You know, Modern League, this is kind of 8th and 7th out of some Modern challenges here. I don't believe, yeah, actually, I don't think the Modern challenges, oh, they are out. Yeah. Okay, so the Modern challenges are, actually Grixis Murktide did win one of the ones on the 22nd, actually. So that's actually pretty good. So when it comes down to it, it's not Faithless Looting in the main board. A lot of people were talking about that for enabling something like Murktide Regen, putting Abhorrent Oculus into your yard to unearth. That's not what this deck wants to be doing. This deck ultimately, Faithless Looting is card negative in value. You are spending 3 cards. You are losing 3 cards. You're casting a Faithless Looting and discarding 2 cards to get 2. It is card selection. You are using your graveyard as an extension of your hand. That's not what you want to be doing here. Psychic Frog is one of your better threats. And so you're just going to be using that to try and win the game. As Emma Partlow, not Emma Partlow, sorry, what am I saying? As I'm forgetting who said this on the stream, but someone on the stream was saying for the weekly MTG stream that Faithless Looting, what does it do in the Modern format? I don't know, it amasses 2 orcs, which is kind of funny. There's a whole lot of Orcish Bowmasters running around in the format right now. The Grixis is the Meltdown, but namely Consign to Memory. Now, I wanted to use this deck to point out Consign to Memory. This card does a lot. Firstly, it's going to be able to counter anything that a Mox Opal deck throws at you. Not anything, but there are a lot of colorless stuff in that deck, obviously, that you're going to be able to counter. So that's great. Outside of the Breach combo decks, you're going to be able to hit not only Eldrazi, but also the traditional affinity decks. The traditional affinity decks are honestly based on a lot of card draw. The decks use a lot of, like, you know, 1 mana draw 2 effects. And so they're largely held back by Orcish Bowmasters. If Orcish Bowmasters was banned in the Modern format, I think Affinity would be a top 5 deck. It would be fast enough. Nothing would be able to really hold it back. Meltdowns wouldn't be fast enough. And it would just play like hate for stuff like that. It would just play more counter magic and try and be ready for the Meltdowns. It's really Orcish Bowmasters that's holding it back, especially this thing having flash. Now, Consign to Memory is really nice because it stops triggers like that, but also it stops stuff like Splinter Twin. Like, you have to remember, this isn't countering Splinter Twin, but when Splinter Twin gets put onto a creature, that creature activates. The creature that is copied, and then a copy gets made, it usually enters the battlefield and has a trigger. I should say usually. It pretty much always has a trigger that enters the battlefield and untaps something else, you can consign to memory that trigger. So yes, there are ways for tempo decks like this to have up a little bit of mana, buy yourself that extra turn, and sometimes that extra turn is all you need to win the game, because sometimes that creature that they're putting onto it may have flying or some type of evasion. That's not going to be, now that it's tapped out, the tokens are going to go away. It's not going to be able to block that Psychic Frog. It might be able to go in for that lethal. You might be able to draw a little bit extra to find some type of answer. Like, this is a deck that's full of answers, full of recursion. You might be able to, you know, just inch out that extra bit that you need with that turn. So Consign to Memory has a lot of playability, not only outside of countering the colorless strategies, but there's a lot of actually really powerful triggered abilities that exist in the format right now that present a lot of power when it comes to that. So it's great. Consign to Memory is really good for something like that. Wanted to use this to point that out. Finally, the last deck that I wanted to talk about is Amulet Titan, House of Mana, coming second place in a recent Modern Challenge here over the last kind of 24 hours or so. And so with that, we have the Green Sun Zenith deck, right? So where is it? Green Sun Zenith. It seems to be a variable amount of copies. The Titan players can't seem to agree on whether it's 2 copies, 3 copies, or 4 copies. There's a little bit of everything. House of Mana is using 3. I've seen lists with 2. I've seen lists with 4. And there's a whole lot of power that you get out of something like that. It seems like a couple of them are using that ability to bring lands back from their graveyards, and they're playing a couple more one-ups. The thing that Green Sun Zenith allows you to do is eventually, if the metagame settles down, the Amulet deck is going to be able to adapt, so that if there is a lot of artifacts all over the format, then they're going to be able to play something oh my god, I'm forgetting the name of it. Green and 1 for a 2/2. It's a hate bear that says artifacts can't have their abilities activated. It's the 2-mana creature. So you can have that tutored up with Green Sun Zenith. You obviously already have the Summoner's Pack. Now Green Sun Zenith, it's 1 more. It's 7 mana to tutor for a Primeval Titan, and you're able to kind of go down on Summoner's Packs now as well. There's a lot of power out of this deck. Amulet Titan has been one of the most powerful decks in Modern for a very long time, held down a lot by a lack of understanding by the player base as to how to pilot it. And so you have a lot of dedicated pilots to a deck like this that can take it to a high tier level. It's able to adapt really well, has a really great primary plan, has ebbed and flowed in terms of what it wants to do. There's been times when it's gone with the Karn the Great Creator strategy. More recently, it's gone with the One Ring, and just being able to draw into more plan Bs, plan As, whatever it might be, just gave it a lot of power here. Now, when it comes to coming out of the sideboard, you have great cards like Defense Grid. You have Bajuka Bogs as tutorable Graveyard Hate. You obviously still have the Endurances, a card that I'm actually really surprised out of the Green Sun Zenith decks that haven't seen more play. I kind of have a feeling that Faithless Looting is more powerful than what Opal is doing. Opal is still a powerful Magic card, and it's probably, I mean, I could arguably still see it being the most busted card. I just feel like Faithless Looting is doing the most. I feel like Faithless Looting is doing the most busted thing. Now, thankfully, it's nothing to do with Dredge, but it's enabling some of the more powerful strategies. And I'm actually surprised to not see more like Lightning Skelemental stuff, more Dredge running around in the format. I'm happy to see some level of Hollow One in there, even if it's being misrepresented. I like to see what Faithless Looting is doing. It's a card that I've always advocated for it to come back. Very powerful. A lot of people have called me a naysayer for it. Doesn't matter, it's back now. Y'all are wrong. Faithless Looting is perfectly fine for this format. It just feels like it's doing the busted thing, and if Faithless Looting is all over the format, we're probably going to see adaptations like Endurances and Tormod's Crypts out of the Urza Saga decks. We will see adaptations that are going to be able to stop the Urza Saga decks, because ultimately the hardest thing to deal with is probably going to be Mox Opal. It just allows for more busted turn 1 starts, whereas Faithless Looting allows you to start for more busted turn 1 setups, and then turn 2 you're kind of just doing a whole lot. Mox Opal just allows you to do the crazy turn 1 stuff, which Endurance isn't really here for, but I wouldn't be surprised if the uptick in Endurance really just like hits like a breaking point thanks to Faithless Looting doing the busted stuff. Now, the last thing I wanted to do was, if you looked at that modern metagame, right? Like if we kind of swing back here, I don't see Is It Twin anywhere. I don't see a twin deck anywhere. Now, okay, there's probably somewhere in here where you could find a twin deck, you know, somewhere, you know, the Rakdos Delirium deck is kind of like the, this right here is the kind of Hollow One deck. I was just curious as to why like the Mardu deck was kind of thing does that, but the Rakdos Delirium deck is that. I was hoping for some white splash here. but there's no is it deck. You could say the Mardu energy deck could do that, kind of funnily. Bam Sync, the one that posts all the modern challenge results, they actually they actually 5-0'd with energy, replacing the exact cards that got banned. Like they replaced 4 One Rings with 4 Splinter Twins and replaced 4 other cards with the card that goes infinite with Splinter Twin, and that's it. You could imagine how putting Splinter Twin onto just a random card in Mardu is just really powerful, like a random Orcish Bowmasters, a random Guide of Souls, a random Ocelot Pride. It still has a lot of value even in there. So outside of just going infinite, Splinter Twin has capabilities, but the problem is if you were to go to its search, you know, it's really just, is it Splinter Twin, right? It's made some appearances in the Modern Challenge. Yeah, it's, you know, Grixis mid-range. It's really, is it Splinter Twin? Yeah, everyone is playing it, but it's not high enough to the point where it's in the modern metagame. Out of the last 7 days, Splinter Twin doesn't have a high representation. So I ask you this, was this unban successful? After 1 week, we can't really say for certain, but I am willing to say on this video that I think this was a successful unban. Splinter Twin was the safest unban in modern for so many years. For the last 5 years, probably since the inception of the first Modern Horizons, Splinter Twin has been a safe unban. So that's been, I think, pretty settled for us. Green Sun Zenith has also been a safe unban ever since the inception of the first Modern Horizons. I don't think Green Sun Zenith is going to be doing anything busted anytime soon. Maybe they break it with the next Modern Horizons. Maybe there's a random uncommon in a standard legal set that also breaks that card. But so far, it's going to be the Yawgmoth strategies and the Titan strategies. This heck, in the Yawgmoth strategies, half of that deck can't even be tutored by Green Sun Zenith. Yawgmoth can't be tutored by Green Sun Zenith. Mox Opal and Faithless Looting are going to be the 2 cards that fight for the top of the roost. Mox Opal, very rightfully so for a lot of people, has been thought to be the most busted card out of this. And honestly, I'm still on that train. I say Faithless Looting is at the top of the you know, kind of busted train. It's doing the most right now. I feel like ultimately Mox Opal, if there was going to be one of these cards that goes back on the ban list in March, it'll probably be Mox Opal. I think Faithless Looting is perfectly fine. There are so many ways to stop strategies like this, and especially if everyone else is doing busted things. Like, I like how they did this on ban because it gives all strategies something to do. It wasn't just we unban Faithless Looting, graveyard decks are everywhere. Everyone is focused on different things. What Opal is doing on turn 1, how Faithless Looting is setting up your graveyards, how Green Sun Zenith is tutoring up crazy green creatures, and ultimately how Splinter Twin is bringing back a time in modern that you wish you had that honestly no longer exists thanks to Modern Horizons. All in all, I think this was a successful unban. There are even more cards that can very much be unbanned from the modern ban list. We should be looking to make that ban list shorter. I'm not saying unban all cards. There are some ridiculous cards on there. We should not be bringing back we should not be bringing back Uro or Arkham's Astrolabe. Let me tell you right now, those two, yo, Arkham's Astrolabe should never be unbanned. That is a busted magic card. That is an insane magic card. There are some cards on that list that will never come back, but some cards on there like Glimpse, absolutely insane how they're still banned in a world of Orcish Bowmasters. If any deck using Glimpse is at the top of the metagame, you got Orcish Bowmasters to stop them. That's all I'm saying. You got Orcish Bowmasters to stop them. No Elf Ball deck is going to survive at the top of the metagame as long as Orcish 2 little orcs from Middle Earth are going to be around to stop that. So all in all, I think the metagame is still developing. We're not sure where things end up. Energy is still very powerful. I think this is a successful unban. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you believe that this is a successful unban for the modern format? What other unbans are you looking for? I'd love to hear it all down below. Ahead of the holidays here, it looks like modern is really developing into a format that I think we're all going to be looking forward to.